Hi, young professionals. Stacy here. Today we're at the David Lust Accelerator building, and we're going to meet with Tom Johnson so you can get to know him a little better. Let's go meet up with him. Hi, Tom.
Oh, hey guys, how's it going?
Doing well, doing
right.
well. Thanks for meeting with us and letting our young professionals know what a day in the life of Tom looks like.
Not that exciting, but I'll give it my best.
So, like usual, young professionals, we're just going to ask Tom some questions and see why he is the way he is, and we'll go from there. So,
Oh,
Tom,
God.
what drew you to Rapid City?
The money, first. But once I got past the money and I got over myself, it was the hills, the Black Hills, the outdoor recreation. It's a cool town. There's not a town that I can think of in the United States that has more accessible mountains than Rapid City. So it really was that.
So, what's your favorite thing to do out in the hills?
I love to hike. I try to hike Black Elk Peak probably once a month.
Oh, wow.
Even in the winter.
I shoot
Sometimes
for once a year, and I think I'm doing good.
I try to do it once a month. I try to see what it's like in the snow, in the rain. Sometimes I do it at night with headlamps. Sometimes I do it in the morning. And then it's also a good way of getting 3 days of steps in one day. So
What's the coolest thing you've seen on the trail out there?
Oh man, the best thing is one time I was the only person on the peak
Oh, wow.
as it was sunsetting. And so I sat there on one of the rocks with the entire mountain to myself as the sun was
Wow.
setting. And I sort of just meditated on the view. It was, it's one of the most, honestly, most spiritual experiences I've ever had, frankly. It was amazing. So it was
That's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so cool.
It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about it.
What is your favorite advice that a mentor has given you, or what are words that you live by? Something in that realm.
You know, I can think of two things. First, my dad, when I was little, he was a blue-collar guy, roughneck truck driver. He would take me with him sometimes into the city. So he would drive for North American Van Lines, and he would go and he would haul furniture all day long from 5 in the morning until like 3 o'clock at night, and then we would drive and we would unload furniture. So as a kid, I was helping him with that. As a teenager, he would take me with him. And so he's a blue-collar guy. And he probably gave me the best advice I've ever gotten. I say this to people a lot. I said it, I think, in the first speech I gave when I was here in Rapid City. It is, there's two kinds of people in the world, those that are humble and those that are about to be. And he would look at me and he'd say, which one are you? Well, the idea was that you want to be the ones who are humble, right? Because if you're not, you're going to get humbled. Life, work, relationships. If you're not humble, you're going to be humbled. Life has a way of humbling everybody. I don't care whether you were born rich or poor, whether you have privilege or not, you're going to get humbled. And so you might as well start from there. The second piece was probably given to me by a guy who worked for a couple presidents of the United States. He was the guy that had the nuclear football. So the president has a nuclear football. There's a guy that carries it. So if somebody's going to launch nuclear weapons at us, he turns to this guy. Guy gives him the suitcase, opens it up, puts in the codes, and then we launch nuclear weapons.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the guy that did that for the United States was one of my mentors when I was in Wyoming, and he was a very humble guy, and he said, "Hey, always remember that you're renting the title. So whether you're in leadership or not, you're there now. Somebody was there before you. Someone's going to be there after you. You're simply renting that title for a period of time." It helps ground you and it makes you recognize that your identity is not your title, and that true authority comes from it's relational, it's not based on position. And so it's really grounded me in always remembering that, I'm not any more important than anybody else. Just because I'm the CEO of an organization or I have a leadership position it doesn't mean that I somehow I'm better or smarter. In fact, you'll find when you're in a leadership position, you have less access to the information. And so you don't know as much as you used to. So you actually become dumber. So you've got to trust more in the idea of relationships as you move higher up. And so just understanding that you're just renting the title helps you realize that, I am not Tom Johnson, CEO. I'm Tom. I've got lots of interests, family, friends, hobbies. It helps you stay grounded. It helps remind you that you have a life outside of work. But most importantly, it helps you stay humble and recognize that, you're just one job away from not being in that title and to another title.
I love it.
And someone's going to come after you, right? So it helps really ground you and make you humble and just recognize that, you are not that title, so you're not that important. Conversely, when you're not in an important title, you're just as important as other people too, so you have a lot to offer. And I think you see that in Elevate, I hope, in our organization. We have staff meetings, and we let everybody go around the table and talk about what's important in their week. And the reason we do that is we don't want to just hear from senior management. We want to hear from everybody from the administrative assistants, to the middle management, to the directors, to me. We all have equal possibility of bringing a good idea. And so there's sort of this equality of ideas, I think, is something that I think that kind of advice allows you to have, because you're just not that smart and as cool and as bright as you think you are.
I always say that
no
if
matter
I'm the
what.
smartest one in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Yeah.
I got to move.
Yep. I agree. I mean, if you're the smartest one in the room, you need to find another room.
Exactly.
Because then you're not learning.
Yep.
And you're probably believing your own press releases. And you're probably thinking you're pretty cool. And it's at that point, again, you go back to my dad's rules. You're about to get humbled.
Yeah.
So
here's one of my favorite questions we have for you today. Why is Young Professional Group important to Rapid City?
they're the lifeblood of the leadership for the future. They're who comes next. So there's old guys like me, and there's even older folks than me who are in leadership positions. And if we're not engaging our young professionals and trying to mentor them and get their perspectives, we're not going to have the best Rapid City in the Black Hills. We get the best when we engage a diversity of perspectives, whether they be race, gender, industry, but also age. So we want to hear from voices all along the spectrum of someone who's in their 60s or 70s, but also somebody who's in their 20s, because often ideas can come from anywhere. And just because you're young doesn't mean you don't have good ideas. And I think specifically good ideas come from young people and young professionals. I think they're also the ones that are more plugged into technology, and they can help bring things to this region and to the community that haven't been here before, especially if they come from the outside. So anytime a young professional moves from somewhere else to Rapid City, they're bringing with them new ideas, new relationships, possibly new capital, and that really enhances our ability to grow. They've done a lot of studies on this topic. Your economy will go as your relationships go. There's two kinds of relationships. There's strong ties, family, friends, stuff that you probably have on Facebook. And then there's weak ties, colleagues and acquaintances like you see on LinkedIn. And young professionals, it's been shown that the more relationships and more weak ties you have over your career, the higher your earnings. The more relationships and weak ties you have into a community, the higher the GDP of the community. And so by having more young professionals, it gives us more opportunities and more relationships. It's like playing the lottery. Good ideas can come from anywhere, and the more tickets you buy, the more chances you have to win. And so the more young professionals we engage, the more chances we have for them to be in leadership, for great ideas to happen, for equity and inclusion to be a part of what we put out there as a community, and frankly, just to be the best community we can be. So it's very critical.
If you wrote a book about your career so far, what would the title be?
There's a book called this, but I think I sort of stumbling into happiness, maybe drunkenly stumbling into happiness.
So with that, we do have a few more questions, but would you mind showing us around the D-Lab? I think the questions kind of flow into those.
Okay.
That idea.
All right. So you want the tour?
Yeah, at least to begin with. So like one question we have is, how many businesses can the D-Lab hold?
That's a great question. I think that it depends. We have flexible walls, as you'll see, and it means that you could fit 4 people in a space. You could also fit 40 people in a space. So I think the best answer to that question is probably somewhere in the range of probably 6 to maybe even 20, depending on how big or small they are.
Perfect.
So there's about 40,000 square feet in this building.
Okay.
27,000 of it is rentable.
Perfect.
Some of the co-working space and the shared space is not rentable, but a lot of the space, the meeting rooms, there's space. It's about 27,000 square feet. So I think we could. My guess is probably comfortably about 10 to 12 companies.
Perfect. Good. What would you say is your dream company to have come into the D-Lab?
Wow. I think anybody's dream company is high tech. So, maybe 10 to 20 jobs. Everybody's making over 100,000 in salary. We can go to the community and say, look at these great high tech jobs we brought to town. That's the easy one. I think the more meaningful one is somebody that's one person. And you coach them, and you find them access to capital, and you find them some angel investors, and then you find them an advisory board, and then they grow into 3 or 4 people. And that 4 goes into 20, and that 20 goes into 50. Then they graduate out of here, and then they get into a bigger building, and maybe there's like 100 or 200. And we saw that recently with my good friend Ray Hespin with Property Meld.
Yeah.
He started as a one-man person in our incubator, and now he's got about 100 employees in downtown Rapid City in the corporate headquarters. So that's a more meaningful company. But I think the easy one that they like are just these like tech companies like, hey, I need some space, we're paying good money, we're using School of Mines grads. Those are the ones you kind of knock out of the park and say, oh, look how great we are, when in truth is they did all the work. But I think the more meaningful ones are the one person that starts out and grows. Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is one that we have rented out currently.
Yep. We've got 3 or 4
Location.
folks in there. They don't need a lot of tenant improvements. They just need some space to put their equipment.
Perfect.
We ran out to some nonprofits over there. Usually they help businesses. So we've got the Governor's Office of Economic Development in here as well, as in addition to Elevate Us, so that we can give the businesses the wraparound services they want. There we go. I don't with me, but I'm glad that this opened. So a lot of folks think that when you're in a business incubator, you have everything built out. But the problem with that is if you build out space before you know what they need, sometimes you can give them stuff they don't need. And so we leave some of these lab spaces and workspaces unimproved so that the tenant can tell us what they want improved down the road. So this is what we have here. We're renovating this for some tenants. They've told us what they want, and we'll be able to make that space exactly what they want versus giving them something ahead of time and then coming back and saying, oh, I didn't need that bay, or I didn't need that wet lab. And so we've learned over the last 10 years when we do incubators that this is a better approach. Build it as the tenants come in versus trying to have it all built up. It costs you more, unfortunately, but it's better for the community.
What would be your advice, or what would you want young professionals to know that are considering moving to Rapid City?
I tell this to some of my friends in Colorado right now. You have no idea how accessible these hills are. Mm-hmm. There is literally world-class mountain biking, hiking, rock climbing that you're waiting 4 or 5 hours to get in line to. Skiing as well.
Absolutely.
Right now you're somewhere in the country and you're waiting 4 or 5 hours to get to those things. And then when you get there, there's several hundred or dozen people on the path with you, and it feels like a city park.
Yeah.
Come here,
amazing.
and there's no wait. I was just hiking this morning at 6 o'clock in the hills. There was absolutely nobody on the trail with me. I walked 4 or 5 miles, and I got to see deer and the trees and the sunrise with absolutely no one around me, and it was just. It was kind of magical, honestly. It reminded me of the old days in Colorado, but they don't have that down there anymore. So we want to preserve that kind of quality of life here. But I think that anybody that's coming to Rapid City, you will be shocked at how amazing and magical that being in those hills really is.
Agreed. Last question for you. What's one piece of advice that you would give to young professionals who are trying to take the next step into holding leadership positions?
There's a book that I recommend to everybody, my staff. There's actually 3 books I recommend to my staff, and every time somebody joins Elevate, I give them 3 books. The first is a book called Stories That Stick. It teaches you the power of telling stories. They've analyzed many of the TED Talks that have ever been given, and they realize the ones that get shared and liked the most, they have about 75% story and 25% fact. Most people, when they give a presentation at a staff meeting or in front of a big group, they flip that. They think they've got to get the facts right, and they put PowerPoints together with facts. It's actually the reverse. 75% facts and 25% story will not get you the results you want. But if you flip that and you tell stories, 75% to 25 ratio, you're going to get more results. And I've learned over time that stories will and are very powerful.
Yes.
Facts will make people think, but stories will make people act, because stories are about emotion and they're about people overcoming conflicts, and that's what we are still to this day. We're just people sitting around a campfire wanting to hear a story. So telling stories is something that every young professional should learn. That's why I recommend that book. The second one is you will overestimate in your career how much technical skill matters. You will underestimate how much being liked matters. So I recommend a book to all the staff here called The Like Switch. It's about how you use body language and rapport and your voice to build friendships, whether it's in the first 2 seconds or for 2 years or 20 years. The guy that wrote it was a former FBI agent, and I think he worked for the CIA as well. His job was to get people to spy on behalf of the United States. So he would often get ambassadors from other countries to turn and spy for the United States. So you have to be able to make friendships very quickly and influence people very fast. And so he wrote a whole book on this topic, from how do you use head tilts and eyebrow flashes, and how do you approach somebody with your palms open to signal that you're a friend and not a foe if your palms are like this. And so I recommend this book, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. How to make empathetic statements, how to be a better listener. Again, there's so much in this book. It's packed with things that it'll take somebody who's an introvert, an accountant, or an engineer, and make them somebody who can work and crush cocktail parties. And so I think that that would be the second book I recommend. And what I would ultimately say is, you're going to underestimate how much being liked matters in leadership and in the workplace. And that's why I recommend that book.
Perfect. Well, Tom, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
hands?
Sure, I'll be awkward here. Young professionals, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our time with Tom. If you felt inspired by him, you will have the opportunity to sit down with him later on in this month. Thanks all.